Oh,
Sorry, I had
yeah,
to
we can
change
see
my
you now.
Wi-Fi. Yeah. Okay, now it should be better unless it switches back. So just a warning that since I'm doing this recording on my system, I may not get one continuous recording for today's session, but the same thing has been repeated in other classes. So in case I the call drops again, I will have I will upload the longest video on YouTube, but then I'll also direct you to another more complete video. All right? Okay. Okay. All right. So I'll just go over this quickly in case some stuff was missed out. I'm trying to compare writing versus drawing because the tool that we're using is similar for both, and we familiarly use it for writing. But now we're going to try and understand what's the difference between writing and drawing. So, what I was trying to show is that while writing, we use only a certain aspect of the pencil, which is write short, firm, dark lines. With drawing, we use short and long lines, firm and dynamic lines, dark and light lines. So this is drawing, we do much more with the pencil than we need to do with writing. So let me try and show you an example. In writing, if I have to write my name, I will make sure that the line is uniform, dark throughout. But if I have to draw my name, if I don't do this, the kind of line that I will have will be, and this looks like a very weak line. Some places it's light, some places it's dark, and so I could even make it even lighter. And this is pretty much a useless line as far as writing is concerned, because for writing, there is a different purpose. You need clarity and legibility. In drawing, you do need clarity and legibility sometimes, but mostly you need the line to create uh, you need to create guidelines. And a preliminary sketch. Now, if you think about it, there are lots of differences between writing and drawing, and we can go on adding more and more items to this, depending upon what part we are, what aspect of the pencil we are examining. So, I encourage you to continue this examination and see other things that you might come up with. Now, unfortunately, in our school system, which I will constantly bash, we are just asked to listen to what the teacher says and don't add any more information and don't think anything about this, because the teacher knows best, and whatever the teacher knows is all there is to know. But I would encourage you to throw out that stupid idea. And while we are practicing, try and observe certain things about pencil, which you think could be one of the factors that could be a differentiator between writing and drawing. And don't be afraid if that factor is wrong or immaterial. Don't be worried about that. You might come up with something that is your observation is applicable to you. All right. So in one of the classes, I have written three, four other points to this, which right now I just can't even remember. So I'm going to I'm not going to give you those points right now, but I will send a picture of that descriptive, so you get an idea of what I was speaking about there. Now let's jump into doing some exercises with pencil. Like we said, we make dark as well as light lines in drawing. We are going to study the range of our pencil. So how does one do that? We are going to explore shading techniques. So to start this exploration, make a box that's about 1.5 or 2 inches wide and about 1 centimeter tall. Divide it in half first and then in 2 more. So you get 4 boxes. In the box on the right, I want you to press the pencil down and shade the box in the darkest possible shade that you can make. Do it very slowly, but do it just once. Drag the pencil down back and forth with as much pressure as you can. You don't need to go back in a second layer. Don't bother doing that. I want you to see, if you just do this once, how dark does your box look? So this is the darkest shade. Then in the box on the left, I want you to now try a new way of holding a pencil. Just gently place it in your hand and just guide the pencil across the span of this box as slowly and as lightly as you can. Now, this is a stretch because we rarely use this very light shade, but I want you to just see if, without adding pressure, if you're just placing the tip of the pencil on paper and through just the action of gravity, how much graphite can you grate onto paper? That's all we're trying to see. That'll give us the lightest shade. Now we know how light we can get and how dark we can get. So now we have these 2 boxes in between them, in which we are going to try and see whether we can modulate our pressure, but keep it constant at a particular pressure so that we get 2 medium shades. So here now, just add a little more pressure than the first box. You will figure out the pressure as you start shading. So right in the beginning, you might get a very light or a very dark patch. That's fine. But then maintain the pressure in the rest of the box. And then now that you are familiar with that pressure, in the next box, can you add a little more pressure so that you get a slightly darker shade. So this way we have got at least 4 shades out of a pencil. This is good to work with. Now, what is common in all these is that in the entire box, we maintained uniform pressure. Which means the box has only got one pressure in its entirety. Now, why this is significant or even a point is will be seen when we make the next boxes. Right next to it, make 2 boxes close to each other, about the same length and height. and a little distance away, a third box. Now, in the box on top, we are going to use variable pressure. In both these boxes, but in two different ways. So we're going to start off with dark shading up to about a fifth of the box, and then steadily start changing the pressure and maintain the pace at which we reduce the pressure till we come to that lightest shade that we had made towards the end of the box. And just before you end the box, lift your pencil away so that a little bit of the paper shade is visible on the right. Now again, we are going to start from the right, but this time round, we're going to reverse the pressure. And we are going to start with a very, very light shade. And as you start moving forward, you can start steadily increasing the pressure. Now you can do it as slow as you want. I'm moving a little fast, but you can go much slower. You can lift your pencil if you want to, if you can remember how much pressure you've put, and try to make it seamless. But if you get excess dark lines and then suddenly your pressure changes in the next stroke and then it goes back to really dark, don't worry, that is bound to happen if this is the first time you're doing this. But you get the idea that as we are proceeding, we are changing the pressure. So there's a difference in uniform pressure over here, and there's a difference in how our pressure has moved. This is very dynamic. Now the next box is also going to be uniform pressure. But the difference in this is going to be that we are going to make layers of uniform pressure. So using your lightest pressure, I'll just explain this to you. You can shade all the way till about here, about 1/5 the way. Then we're going to change the direction of our shading till slightly shorter of a distance, and then steadily reduce the distance that you are going to shade while also changing the angle. So let me show this to you. With the lightest shade and with my pencil moving back and forth at about 60 degrees, I am shading up to the dot at the extreme right. That's about a sixth of the way away. Now, the second layer I have to bring till here, and it's not a strict measure that it has to come just till here. It can go a little ahead, it can come a little behind, depending upon how you get this gradation. Now I'm making my shade vertical. Even the angle doesn't matter so long as layer after layer, you will change the angle. And you can choose from any of the 360 degrees that we have in a circle. I'm coming to the second, this is the second layer, second dot. Change the angle again. Now I can go 60 degrees in the other direction. But in all of these, my pressure remains the same. I don't increase the pressure. That is the exercise. Now I come to the third dot from the right. Go back to maybe 45 degrees. Even horizontal. And then vertical again. So we are overlapping a layer, one layer at a time, to create a gradation like the first box. But here it's the same pressure, but we have a much more uniform, controlled space. I think in anything, in any kind of art skill or maybe any skill, even sport, the main I think the aspiration or what makes one an expert is the fact that they can control their tools. Like in football, you can control the ball, you can decide where it goes. So, control is very important to be able to predict and to wield in such a way that you can have a predictable result. That is what makes you an expert. So, all of these exercises are for you to become best buddies with your pencil so that when you're working together, your lines are doing exactly what you want them to do, so that once you have that control, you can imagine what you want to do and then make it possible on paper. That's the whole purpose. Now, when you're shading this, you might have noticed some of you might have gotten lines. Some of you might have gotten patches of dark or light. So, what's happening is your muscles may not be steady and ready for this kind of movement. That's all. So, we just have to get the muscles ready. That's one thing. But it's also good to know what is probably happening when you get lines in your pencil shading. So, just a small diagram. If I don't know if you all can notice this, my pencil, one of the edges of my pencil from where I have been shading is slightly flattened. Can you see this? So it looks like this. So if I were to make a microscopic picture of my pencil, and slightly exaggerated, this is how it starts getting eroded. And obviously then with this end, I can make a slightly thicker line, right? So while my fine line is like this, when I press it down and I work on it, it starts becoming a thicker line. So the trick is to not roll your pencil while you're shading. And what we want to do is lay down successive lines, one next to the other, in order to get a fine shade. Now, if we have to work with a very thin line for that kind of shading, we won't get a subtle overlap and you won't get an even shading. So let's see, this is one block where it's going to make it uneven and one block where I'm going to make it even. So if I just do this, some places I'll get it even and some places I start getting lines and some places I get even a fine line. That's because inadvertently we roll our pencil. But even if your pencil does not have a flat edge to begin with, whenever you start shading, just keep at it without moving. Now this, if you can see, this silver part is on top, keeping it the way I've held it the first time round. As I erode the pencil onto the paper, that edge will start becoming blunt. And I will be able to lay down these lines one after the other very successfully. Now, when you roll the pencil on the side, the cross section will look somewhat like that. And this will give you a thin, firm line. So with the same pencil, you can do a drawing of a thin line as well and of a fat line. So stay conscious about your shading. When you want lines, use the thin line part. And when you want to shade, don't roll the pencil. All right. Now I'm going to share some images with you, which I want us to try sketching. Oh, wait, before that, I have to do a little primer with you. So using these techniques, let's try making some shapes. So pencil shading in action. Remember these cubes that we had drawn. You draw 2 dots, visualize the center of the dots, make a dot above the center and below the center. So it's like a squished diamond shape. Join these dots. From the center dot, pull down a line that comes about an inch low, or about, yeah. And then from the sides, you will draw lines which stop short. They do not come as long as the central line. And join these in a V shape. And now, of these 3 surfaces that we have, 1, 2, and 3, take 2 surfaces, any 2, and color them up in any 2 shades, preferably the light and the dark. So take your time shading back and forth in one side, maintaining the pressure. And then on another surface adjacent, you will make, just maintain whichever pressure you choose. I'm not insisting that it must be 100% light or whatever. And the third face, you don't shade anything. You leave it white. So this is a high contrast image where you have the darkest, lightest, and a mid-tone. And these are desirable shades that you should have in a black and white sketch. You should have some very dark tones. You should have some places where there's zero lead. So that means you see paper, and then a range of grays in between for clarity. And this is how you can test your pencil also. Now, this is a Faber-Castell 6B, which is not a usual pencil. But I suspect that you are probably using a 2B pencil, just a dark pencil. So the difference between these dark and hard pencils is that the graphite that has been used in the pencil is mixed together with some kind of binder. And that allows the pencil lead to be made into cylinders which are strong enough. Otherwise, graphite is pretty brittle if it is made into this slim column of for the pencil. And then the pencil, the wooden part itself is also 2 halves with a groove in the center, which come and are sealed together around that graphite, and then they are sharpened. And at this point, maybe you all can guess how long ago the pencil was invented. Any guesses? No? No guesses? Just throw in a figure.
A century and a half ago.
A century and a half. I'll give you,
Yeah,
I'll
like
show you.
sometime in the 1800s. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That sounds about right.
Older.
It is actually much older than that. Maybe
older.
2
So you're
centuries
talking
ago.
about, are you
There were
talking about the
people
cave
drawing. I don't know what
paintings?
they drew with.
Yeah,
Actually, I never thought of
charcoal.
it. What did they draw with? Yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
no, they had leads. I'm sure of it. Why am I sure of it? I have no idea. But it's,
Well, so there is a very interesting story about the pencil, and I'll share it with you all. So initially, the graphite that we know was it's not. I mean, they have used some. Maybe they wanted to include the probably the story was written by the Brits, so they wanted to include themselves in the story of invention of the pencil. But what they did was use these pieces of what's called peat bog. So that is a very dark, it's a petroleum product which is very dark and muddy and thick. So I believe that is the kind of soft material that they use to first mark sheep. So shepherds would mark their sheep with that. And that because it was very tarry like, it was water resistant, it would stay on the sheep uh, through the season, through shearing, I believe. Then, because it was so sooty and it was so difficult to get off their hands, that they would take 2 pieces of wood and bind that. So they would have to hold the wood, and it became a kind of rudimentary pencil, a very huge thing. And then eventually, sometime I think in 1773 or something, almost close to the French Revolution, um, these guys, Faber-Castell, in fact, invented the pencil like we see it today, making it into a small cylinder, a thin cylinder, which is then hugged by 2 pieces of wood. And as one might think, originally pencils were cylindrical also, but they kept rolling off the desk, and then the lead would keep breaking. So some genius came up with the idea of cutting hexagons on the side. So then, very rarely will a pencil, unless it's given momentum, fall off a table. But if you have a cylindrical pencil, it's very easy for it to fall off. So I'll share this article with you if I find it. It's fascinating how something we take for granted has such an interesting history. So as the pencil started being used for drawing, they realized that there was a range that we could create. And they created a range of pencils which work from the hard pencils, which are marked with an H. So you have 2H, 4H, 6H. I've never used them. And as far as I know, these pencils are used in places where you are going to then use another medium on it, but you cannot afford to erase because the surface might be very delicate. So these hard pencils are used to make very light lines, just about indicate. And then the artists often use soft pencils, which is anything from 2B up to 8B, and then finally charcoal. So this is not charcoal, and this is not lead either. It is just called lead, but it's actually the material is graphite mixed together with some kind of binding ingredient. And depending upon the quantity of the graphite versus the binding agent, you get a certain softness or hardness. So when we say there's a reason why these are called B pencils, like 2B, 4B, 6B. We can guess the hard, but the B also has a meaning. I'll get back to you with that as well. All right. So whichever pencil you're using, there is a certain standard that has been laid out, and depending upon the quantity of binder, you will get softer pencils. Now, the softer your pencil is, the surer you need to be about your line, because the line marker, the graphite mark can be so dark that then you can't erase it as well. But a 2B up to 4B is pretty safe. And then also you need to be able to have a very light hand when you're drawing. If your hand is very heavy, once you mark paper with lead, then that lead tends to stay. So we are going to try and do this over this month. I want to just lighten everybody's hands. Okay, so now the next exercise, we are going to use up these dynamic grades. So here we are going to draw 2 cylinders, starting with 2 dots, and then join them with 2 ovals, but along the sides, keep the line almost straightish. So over here, keep it straight so that you don't, by mistake, make an almond shape. And from the bottom also, extend the line down first and then go around and meet up almost vertical. Otherwise, this is the box you will get, which is diamond shape, almond shape. And this makes it look pinched from the side. This is what we want. This is what we want to avoid. And let's make another one. Now the first box, we are going to shade like this. The shading will start from the left and go all the way. Elaine, in your case, you can start the shading from the right because it'll be slightly easier for you to come in this direction. So start it from the right with the darkest shading and come almost all the way towards the left, but reduce it till up to the end so that you don't have any graphite over there. So this is how we'll do it.
Yeah, I did that with the longer ones also.
Yeah. So here I am moving pretty dark, reducing the pressure about a third the way away, and then reducing it further and ending just before I reach the end of the cylinder as I see it on the right. And again over here, if there are some white patches, leave them. You don't need to go back and correct them. Now the second box, or rather the third one that we've drawn here, we are going to shade exactly like that, but from 2 directions. And in this case, we're going to leave a blank patch in the center. So you start dark and almost immediately start reducing pressure as you come towards the center. And then from the other side, dark. So that you get a highlight in the center. So these are 2 very basic techniques of shading, very basic items. But we rarely encounter such basic items. We are going to be shading many more complex items. So we have to do a combination of these 2. Plus, there's another technique which I want to show you, where you can create the same kind of effect using lines. But now let me introduce you to an ideal line in pencil. Now, like we said, we have certain short, firm, dark lines for clarity and legibility in writing. When we move from writing to drawing, and we have to change short to long, firm lines to dynamic, dark to light, it starts becoming a little difficult for beginners because you're unsure. So our first step is to draw lines which are short and which are strung together. So very often beginners will naturally try to draw lines which are like that, which build one short line next to above the other. So now, as much as I keep saying this is not a line, this is a line as far as you know how to make a line, transitioning from writing to drawing. And this gives you a certain measure of steadiness. But we want to avoid this line because one is there's no guarantee that you're going to keep one line next to the other. If it shifts a little bit, what you land up is just making what looks like grasses that have been mowed over. Not a good line. Then the next kind of line, again, if you want to make a long line, this is again when people who are learning to cycle just speed along, thinking that speed is going to keep them on track. So you just draw lines like that. And this is almost as good as trying to cross a road with a child where you take the child's hand and halfway through you say, now run. So we don't want that also because there's no telling where that child is going to run off to. So you have to hold the child's hand from one end of the road to the other end of the road to make sure that it goes exactly where you need it to go. So that is one. Now the third thing that happens is when you're drawing your line, sometimes there's another technique where people will make a rough dotted line like that. And I have done all of these. So I know from personal experience that we have gone through these phases. So you'll make this line, hoping that then you will be able to join this together. Now this is a shade better because at least you are attempting to do something different from writing. But we still don't want this line. The best line to start with for beginners, firstly, has to be light. So reduce the pressure. That itself is very difficult to do. So hold the pencil a little far away and draw your line with your pencil very lightly. It should barely be visible. Then change your grip for that. Normally we hold the pencil with our 3 fingers. Sometimes people are holding it with all sorts of fingers and creating this awful grip and literally strangling the pencil. I don't even know how they do it. I feel after another 10 years, their entire hand is going to suffer so much. So you need to have a certain grip, whatever your grip is, even if it's like this, your writing grip will be something which requires you to hold the pressure firm, but your drawing grip can be different. You can sometimes draw like this, sometimes you can draw like that, sometimes you can draw like this. There's lots of ways in which you can draw a line, but you still need to draw a light line. Okay? Then it's the quality of line. Now, the ideal qualities of line. One is if you draw a line which has no discernible starting point. So it's almost as if your line just comes and your pencil just comes and lands on paper, becomes dark, and then it can take off again. So there is no clear indication of where the line starts or finishes, as opposed to when we draw a line like this. You know a start and finish. Sometimes you know a start but not the finish. These are the 2 typical lines. But here we want to be able to draw this at will. Then you want to be able to draw this in whatever shape you want. Right? Also, various darknesses. So you can have anything from as light as this to as dark as this. All of this must be possible. You should also be able to draw a line which starts from nothing but ends at a definite point. Starts from a definite point and ends very gradually into nothingness. And then, of course, this line in between. This is absolute control of the pencil. Now, till you come to this level, at least what you can do is create a confident line. So, not a hairy line, not a full speed line, and not a preliminary dotted line before. So a confident line is just a line that is firm throughout, which should technically be easy for you to do, for anyone to do who is moving from writing to drawing. So you just draw a confident line and it is going to fluctuate a little bit. It's going to be bumpy. But this is any day a better line than any of these, however accurate you might think these lines are. So I want everyone to come to this level, a predictable line, which is like a pendulum. And just to see whether we can make this, let's try making a circle, but like this. Now, try to make a very light circle using a long, confident line, but not hesitating of that. Okay, and then make a dark line in half the circle, and then complete the remaining with another couple of dark lines. It should be such that even if these lines don't join, they should point towards each other. Okay, so you'll get this. The more shapes you make, you'll get this line. As long as you know that this is what we want. This is ideal. Now, there's another way that we can do shading, and this is by using our pencil in very fast lines. I'm going to hold my pencil really far away to make lines which are going to be parallel to each other. I want you to just observe this technique of shading. I'm going to make this look like a cylinder, and though I'll show you how a cylinder has to be shaded, this one I'm going to just do it, and I want you to just observe how I'm working the lines. So this is my highlight, and my shades are going to be darker and darker as a line goes around the circular form of this shape. So here I'm going to make a set of very light lines all around that highlight. The lines are made at about 45 degrees from the edge of the book, and they are about 1 to 2 millimeters away from each other. They're not uniform, but they're pretty close. What is common is their darkness. So this is one color. Then I'm going to make a second set of lines by changing the angle and coming up to the second circle. Now I'm changing the angle again, and this time I'm going to make it slightly darker also, and I'm just shading the area between the third and the fourth line and leaving a little gap between the fourth and the fifth line. And the next one, I'm going to make slightly darker lines at the joint between the fourth and the fifth line, but not going all the way to the fifth line. So I have now created a gradation, but using lines. And in order for this to look more convincing, maybe one more dark shade here, I will also make a shadow. And this too, I'm going to shade into 3 different shades. So this is one, and maybe another one here. Every time I'm putting a layer of shadow, I'm changing the angle of the texture. And then I have one here, which is just going to be dark, because I'm going to add contrast with that. Now, this kind of shading using lines is a much better way to shade objects quickly. We are not using pencil shading for always making a final finished product. We are going to use it to study contrast, composition, placement, light and dark. Definitely not color at this stage, but at least whether it's a light color or a dark color. So I will show you a picture now. I'm going to share some images on the group, which we are going to try to make. All right. So these are the images that I've shared. We are going to do a more extended study of this next week. This is called chiaroscuro, a study of light and dark in grays. So this study extends to sketching, painting, film, photography, anything that is high contrast and low in color and can create very often dramatic effects. And the reason why this is studied is to really understand truly how light can make a difference in your illustration. Sometimes the right light can change the focus of an object from the foreground to the background and totally tell a different story. So this is one of those studies that is done in fine art, but I find utterly fascinating. So we'll do more of this next week. But you can see how they have divided the shades into so many different types of shadows. So you have a highlight, then you have a center light, you have these half tones, the core shadow, reflected light, occlusion, and cast shadow. Now, many of these terms we won't be using, so you don't have to really learn them or anything, but they're good to know. The most important terms that we will be using would be highlight, cast shadow, which is any kind of shadow, and and the core shadow would just be the shade. But now look at this reflected light. Right at the bottom where we think we would put the darkest shade is reflected light. And this is the light that is reflected from this point. And this reflected light often is what makes faces look round. If you draw a shadow right up to the bottom of a person's face or chin, it looks like a beard. But if you leave that little bit of reflected light or this occlusion shadow, it looks like it is a rounded surface. So this is just interesting to know right now. We are not going to shade this, except for what I have shaded right now. That one has been shaded exactly like this. I have made a darker tone over here, medium tones around the highlight, and there's a little bit of reflection. And then you have a cast shadow and a darker shadow at the bottom, which is the occlusion. Now, what I want you to try are these pictures. So this is a scribbled image of a duck or a goose. And I want you to try to sketch that in this kind of loose line style. That's one. I'm going to show this to you, wait, and then you can. And then I want to also show these. These are, again, still life sketches, probably will be converted into paintings at some point. But here's a study in composition. How should you place the peaches and the banana? Or if you have lemons and a plate, how do you place them so that the composition looks interesting? We are not worried about the composition right now because there are a lot of things that one can discuss, but just how they have rendered a quick sketch. Okay, so I'm going to show you two of these first, and then you can try them yourself also. Now, at the back of the page, you can try this. So more than how the sketch turns out, I want you to see this as an exercise for your hand. Your hand has to move very loosely. So if you can keep your pencils down and just observe how I'm trying to make it, then you might try the same kind of line work. So first is getting that proportion. I am drawing very static lines and I'm not lifting the pencil if I can help it. So I'm drawing a structure first. Hoping that my duck looks like a duck and not like any other bird. And then as your structure is more well built, you can then shade in where you or where the artist feels they are going to put some shadows. So the pencil moves darker or lighter or numerous ways in the areas where a dark shadow would probably come at some point. So this also allows you to modify your drawing depending upon the result that you desire and what result you're getting. The pressure can be changed to anything as you're going along. To create light or dark lines. And this is just a texture for maybe indicating feathers or whatever. Okay, so first we have structure. Then features or shadows. And then possibly a texture. Those are the purposes that you use. And once you know that that is the purpose, then making a line like that, knowing that this is where I'm going to put the shadow, becomes very easy. Then the lines are no longer a mystery. Okay, do you want to give it a shot? And it won't take more than a minute if it's done right. Are you getting it? How's it going? You should be done by now. Oh, okay. Okay, nice. Good. Lines are very loose. Okay. Shall we move to the next one? I'll show you the next one. Here again, it's pretty much the same. But here we are going to focus on the contour of the object. I'm drawing the last picture, that's that lemon wedge or that slice of a fruit. So again, every time you are making a sketch, the first thing that we will make will be the structure. And the structure is often constructed out of small basic shapes. So when we're drawing a pear, for example, the pear has a small circle and then it has a large circle. So you're free to make these preliminary lines in order to get that shape right. When you're drawing the structure also, it's very common to draw almost straight lines. Now these lines are different from the lines which are like that, built on one another. These are very confident lines. And then the wedge. So once your structure is done, we are going to make different lines in different directions. This is an unusual study for the most part. We hardly ever do this, but it's a matter of moving your hand quickly back and forth, either making lines or a zigzag, but maintain pressure. And there are cues on the drawing itself in what direction you need to go. So the lighter lines are made using, lighter sections are made using lines, and the darker sections are made using the same lines in the form of scribbles. So every time you change direction, you're adding a facet, a dimension to this object. And every time the lines intersect or threaten to, they create the illusion of roundness. So all you need to do right now is imitate those lines to the best of your ability, or imitate the sense, what they're trying to indicate. Now your lines May not come exactly like this artist, so don't worry about that. But at least somewhere close to the artist in terms of the texturing. So some places where you have to make vertical lines, you are able to make those the way the artist has made them. How are we doing? All okay?
Enjoying it. Enjoying the lines not being so, that control on the shading that we did earlier.
Yeah.
This is so much nicer. With
Oh,
thick
good.
lines, you can get the instead of struggling with that control about shading.
Oh, very nice, Amulya. Looking
Nice
great.
idea.
This is such a
Lovely.
nice start. Good, good.
Yeah.
Aditi, but the one challenge I'm facing is when you do the structure, right? So say I've done the structure of the pear, but my pencil is either falling short before the line or it's going overshooting the line. So do you think that's to do with speed or
No, that's
maybe
again
just
control. It's just control. Again, knowing exactly where to put the pencil down. But it's not a big deal. So I'll tell you how I would work with that. You can go a little outside of your limit as well. Let me take another picture and show you. Suppose I draw the lemon in the second picture over here. So this is the structure that I make. There's a highlight over here. So what you're saying is if you draw this, your lines are coming outside, right?
yeah,
So
either they come outside or it's just falling short. It's ending before the line.
ending before is no problem. That's perfectly okay. If even if they're coming outside, it's not a big problem if you think about it, because it's just a sketch anyway. But what you can do is stop short and then change the angle
Okay.
so that you cover this up. And anyway, you realize that you do need to do that in order to create dimension. Now, suppose your lines overshoot. In the long run, it's not a big deal because in some places, like even if I were to overshoot in this direction, it won't make a difference too much after I have finished whatever I need to do within the object. So maybe I'll make another set of lines like that. And if you want, you can just reduce the length to close to the edge. But if it's a confident line, it will still look good. And in the case where the object has, the lines have overshot the bottom of the object, you can always add a shadow, or there will be a texture underneath which you can highlight and focus on and eat that up. Now, there are a few lines over here which are still coming out, but that does not do much to mar the integrity of the object that I'm trying to show. Okay, so a few things here or there is not a big deal for now. Eventually, if you have, say, a circle, you will be able to make the lines more accurately within the circle or within whatever shape you want. That is a control we want to develop, and that will come gradually. Okay, let's see lanes. Oh, nice. You had fun with that.
Yeah, but my hand is all over that, and it's smeared nice and gray
Oh,
over the
I was
lemon
yeah.
paste.
So I was supposed to tell you to use the guard
I
sheet.
realized that's why you wanted us to keep that paper, right?
Yeah, yeah. Totally forgot.
That doesn't matter. Now I know out of sheer
Yeah.
experience that I should keep a paper, which I'll probably forget next time. You told us this before also.
Yeah, you with pencil sketching, you have to just keep it. Okay, so now I'm going to ask you to pick an object from around you and try this kind of shading. Just, it won't be like a composition shading. Even a fruit or vegetable that you have lying around, you can bring that. Keep it in front of you and try to sketch that. Now, I'm going to get mine and I'm going to show you how it works.
What do we have to get, Elaine?
Any fruit,
Any object.
Any fruit, object, banana, orange, anything else, like onion, potato,
some
anything. Well, you can always try a bottle, which is very much more difficult. Might as well get an amorphous shape. Nobody
yeah,
knows
any shape
exactly
is
what it's like.
any shape is fine.
Oh,
Okay, so here I have two shapes. I have an egg carton, it's always nice. And I have an apple. Let's see how this turns out. Okay, so with the apple, now I don't have a sharp highlight. I can imagine a highlight over here, but I have these lines on the apple that I can see. And I'm going to try and draw it the way I am seeing it. So the if I just tilt it slightly above, up high, this is how my view is of the apple. But I'm tilting it so I can see that view. I'm making it over here so that I can make the egg carton on the side. So getting a good shape. Now for apples, we have these contour lines to show us how the shape of the apple is working, right? So these can be also used for shading. So you can create lines which work like that, or you can just use horizontal lines. And every time there's a change in the angle, you can change the line to that angle. Now the highlight is somewhere over here. So I can, like I did the first circle, I'm just making these horizontal lines or sorry, parallel lines throughout the apple, and then change the angle at the pertinent points. Like over here, I can see a slight darker shade. I'm going to change the angle and make that dark shade by in the shape of that shadow by just changing the angle and making that shape. And then change it further to give myself a shadow over here. Now, with an apple, the shadows are very subtle unless you put a spotlight on it. But you can see quite a lot. Now, when it comes to this navel of the apple, I'm going to use what are called contour lines. And we're going to do this next week. Different kinds of textured shapes. And now the shadow of the apple is a quite long shadow like that. And I'm just making it slightly small so that's manageable. And fill it up with these lines. This is one shadow. And then change the angle a little bit and make it slightly darker towards the apple. Change it a little more. Make it even darker in an oval form like this. And then if need be, I can make even darker shadow right underneath. And here now there's a nice shadow of the stalk. So I can make that as well. Just a little bit of texture effect here. And now last, the egg carton. Egg carton is fun because firstly it is gray and it's got lots of different facets. So you can see different kinds of shadows in this. So drawing it is also fun. And then also if you open it up, you have even more texture and more shapes. The light can fall even differently. So I'm going to keep this a little distance away. You might not be able to see it, but this is how I'm going to make it. The rules of drawing are the same. I visually am marking the angles of the carton. This we've done in the past, so I won't really explain it too much. This will help me structure it. Straight line, straight line.
Has he told you to rest it?
Now, once the structure is made, you can start making the final line work. So if your lines are nice and confident, and also those undulating lines that I've explained, you can draw as many lines as you want. They will all work with each other. Now here, I'm going to draw slightly more curved lines. Curved inward over here. Inward over here. Outward over here. Now again, in this part, I can see the shadow only in so much. So I'm going to just make it over there. And then, of course, the bottom. There aren't too many sharp shadows on the bottom, which is a shame, but I'm going to make them anyway. So the cartoon opens a little extra here. There's a dark shadow on the inside. And here I'm just using those horizontal lines or parallel lines, not rounded. So there's a shadow over here, much deeper shadow, and it's deeper on the inside. So here I'm making vertical lines coming up in a shape. Similar shadow here. In a particular shape, I'll have them come up in this form. Okay, so this is how the egg carton looks. The view is somewhat like this. Yeah. And of course, we have a shadow, which I'm not bothering to make right now, but it's just going to be like a box. So where's the shadow? Weird shape. All right. Any questions?
Egg box is lovely. Just looked at it. I haven't done anything else. Thought my apple looked like I also got an apple, but that,
Okay, just let me
it's
have
an
a closer
overhead
look.
light, na? So and there are two lights, one from here, one from there. So the shadow was a little iffy.
But nice, very nice.
This one, though, don't even ask what it is. It's my palette lying teda over here, and I shouldn't have started it, but I will try it another.
I could tell.
Oh, you could. I couldn't tell myself. I said, "What is this shape, angle, all wrong?" I said, "I'll do it again."
No. So this week, I'm definitely going to give you homework is to make sketches of objects that you see around you. So you can do, yeah, Amulya's is good, nice. So Amulya, your lines, pencil lines, make them even looser still. So right now they're too close to each other. They can go a little further and try a range of pressures. So some places make them light pressure with multiple overlaps, and then suddenly a dark overlap, just maybe once. And then you could also try that the lines themselves, as you overlap them, can steadily start becoming darker one by one.
Okay.
So right now, I think they're too
A bit
close.
of layering. Yeah,
Ah.
but they're close.
Yeah.
Okay. So also the pencil has to be sharpened, maybe.
Pencil should be sharpened. Yeah. Very nice. So
Okay.
this is it. This is the homework. Just pick objects around you. There's hajar stuff in the kitchen, and do attempt bottles. They're not too bad. Maybe smaller jars where don't go for a very long
Yeah.
shape. Go for smaller jars because that can be a nightmare. And even things like your electronic gadgets, your morning cup of coffee or whatever, draw that with this line shading. It should be no more than a 5-minute sketch. We have done these sketches in the past 20 minutes, I think. So that means that we can make sketches in about 5 to 6 minutes each, right? So just spend that much time every day because that is the only way your hand will start becoming loose and your line, you'll get much more control on your line. So the justification for why pencil sketching is important, or why I would say this is almost like the mother of all mediums, is because once you get this done, there are aspects of pencil sketching, not just the lightness of the hand, that pervade all other mediums as a foundation requirement. So, like I said, when you have a light hand, what you draw also becomes much better. A light hand helps to literally skate over your page and make an illustration. So when you're doing watercolor, if your basic illustration is flawed, no matter how much color you throw on it, it will not really work. Secondly, when you're painting also, if your hand is very heavy, you tend to make the color very dull. So that lightness of hand developed with sketching can help in color application as well. Then when you start sketching objects around you, you start seeing that you are able to better and better grasp dimension, proportion, scale, and that is invaluable for any art form, right? If you know how to make anything exactly the way you see it, then you can start making stuff exactly the way you can imagine it. But you can't do the second part without doing the first part. And people who make surrealistic paintings and who cannot sketch, I would throw them out of the window. That's all rubbish. And especially abstract. Abstract, though, it's only for time pass. And I fully appreciate anyone who wants to make acrylic abstracts for time pass, but please don't call it art. It's you're still to come to that level, I would say. So I'm a little strict about pencil sketching because in my experience, that has done a 180 degree as far as my own art was concerned. And the only difference between me and other students who at that time were applying for art college or design college was that I had only 3 months of daily pencil sketching practice. It was quite by accident that I landed up doing that every day, up to 2, 3, 4 hours a day because I had nothing better to do. I was only doing pencil sketching. And I could literally draw anything by the end of those 3 months. Okay, so we are going to do that. Next week, I will be doing, no, actually, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing because I'll just scare you off. We will just continue with pencil sketching. If there is something in pencil that you want to do, share images and let me know. And another thing is, as you're sketching every day, your daily practice, please shamelessly share it on all our groups. This group, Art from Home group, any other groups that you are part of, to shame the other members into doing their homework also. Because this has been told to everybody. And then when they see 1 or 2 people doing it, they start feeling bad and they'll at least sketch one day of the 6 and something will have been done. All right?
Ma'am, I did
Yeah.
try something. If you could critique it so that I can better it. I do know, I made very small, I don't know, sketch. I should have probably given like some freedom to my hand because this was the first time I was trying something. So if you could critique it so I could learn, how to.
Yeah. So I see that you've got the proportions well. You have indicated highlights and shadows in the right places. So you can tell that this is probably a cylindrical object. It's just a matter of now you will know that maybe you should make or not few, more lighter shades also. So the lines can be a little far apart, and only when the lines, only where the shadows start becoming darker, can the lines come closer and become darker. That's all. So you're definitely on the right track.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. So I'll see you all next week then.
Yes.
Bye.
Yes, thanks.
Bye. Happy
Bye,
Holi.
Aditi.
Thanks,
Happy
Aditi.
Happy
Happy
Holi.
Holi. Bye.
Happy
Happy
Holi.
Holi all.